Today we honor the contributions of Dr. Ruby Morton Gourdine for her fantastic service to the profession and the Howard University School of Social Work. This program is being recorded and will be on our website. We especially welcome the Gourdine family as we gather to celebrate the social work scholarship and mentorship of our colleague and friend. Will the family please stand? So you'll know who they are. Let's just give them a round of applause. I'd like to also acknowledge special friend, Ms. Lois Calhoun, friend of the family, for being here with us today. Many of you know that this is Social Work Month and Women's History Month. And so it seems especially fitting that we use this time to celebrate and honor Dr. Ruby Gourdine. I say to you, alum who are out there, welcome home. We've not been able to be together for a while now, and this is really an occasion that we will take full advantage of having you back home at Alma Mater. I have received so many beautiful tributes that will be memorialized by the Office of Agency-Based Instruction that you knew as Field Education. Dr. Janice Davis is helping us memorialize those tributes, and we will share them with the family in the coming weeks. The tributes have come from across the country. Individuals who have had an opportunity to know and publish and fight with Dr. Gourdine. So they've all sent me personal notes as well as professional notes. And certainly we want the family to have the opportunity to have some of those. I ask that all faculty and staff of the School of Social Work please stand at this moment. Thank you so much for that. In the programs, you will see reflections from our faculty. And because we wanted to allow as many people as possible to speak today, we are not having everyone speak representing the faculty, but we want you to know that she's in our heart and in our soul. I was preparing an email today, and Dr. Gourdine would always say, don't hit the send button yet. So it depends upon what was going on. She would always say, just hold it, don't hit the send button. And so I know that she has shared that with many of you, or she said, if I were you, I wouldn't do that. I know that you have heard that message delivered from her many times. The program that you have received was designed by our staff and reflects Dr. Gourdine's phenomenal contributions. You know, it is very hard. It is extremely hard to capture 30 years in a program. So what I would say to you, she is captured in our hearts and our souls. So if it is not written there, know that you carry that message with her. It is really an important day for the School of Social Work to celebrate her legacy. I am going to have the participants in the program move through and provide self-introductions and introduce you the way Dr. Gourdine would have introduced you. You know what your relationship was with her. So I will begin with spiritual reflections from Reverend Dr. Christine Wiley, who earned her MSW and PhD in social work here at Howard University. Thank you so much, Dr. Wiley.
It's good to see all of you present today, and especially the family here today. And Dr. Gourdine was very special in my life, and as my professor, but also a leader in the direct practice section, and she always helped me to get it right. So it really is hard to believe that Dr. Ruby Gourdine is no longer with us in the flesh. I remember being shocked when my daughter, a graduate of the Howard University School of Social Work, texted me from California, where she now lives, to tell me that Dr. Gourdine had died. This was before I received a communication from the school. The news traveled far and wide. Dr. Gourdine referred in her podcast, which Dr. Cosby did with her, to a book called Unfaithful Angels. This book examines how the profession of social work hasn't always lived up to its original mission to aid and serve the underprivileged. Much has changed since that book was written in 1995. I guess those authors didn't know about Howard-prepared social workers. But Dr. Gourdine still reflected on whether the profession has lived up to its promise. I call Dr. Gourdine a faithful angel. As a human being who was faithful in her life to her God and the church where she worshiped, the Metropolitan AME Church, her family, and her profession. You know, faith and spirituality are core values of African Americans and a value of social work, as our Council of Social Work Education has noted. And there are three attributes that come to mind when I think of what characterizes both faith and social work. They are advocacy, justice, and truth. Dr. Gourdine was a passionate advocate, a justice seeker, and a truth teller. Her legacy can really teach us something. There's something about her love and knowledge of history that allowed her to see the injustices in this world and to be one who advocated for those for whom she served, whether children or students. She grew up in the segregated South with a family who valued education and talked about what was going on in the world. She saw racism and segregation firsthand and was in her first march for desegregation at the age of 11. She actually did follow the admonition, "He has told you, O woman, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God." She spoke truth to power as she asked questions about why the courts were not desegregated as she worked as a probation officer in Richmond, Virginia. They didn't like her question. So as a young social worker in probation and child welfare and adoption, working in various parts of the country, she saw the inequities of young, poor, and Black children and advocated for them. I'm sure somewhere the scripture, "Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and please the widow's cause," impacted her. One of the things she often said was, "Learn to tell the truth." She was a justice seeker, a passionate advocate, and a truth teller who admonished students here at Howard University to understand history, the context of how racism is promoted, and that slavery still affects people's progress today. Proverbs says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy." She was an NASW pioneer, and her pioneer work addressed the inequities of services provided based on race. I'm sure she was familiar with that scripture in 2 Corinthians, which says, "Our desire is not that others might be relieved while you are hard pressed, but there might be equality. At the present time, your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn, their plenty will supply what you need. The goal is equality. As it is written, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little." Dr. Gourdine experienced racism herself as a social worker, as did her clients in those early days working in Roxbury, Boston. Scripture notes she did nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, she valued others above herself, not looking to her own interests, but to the interests of others. The amazing thing is that she did so much as a professional social worker before serving on the faculty of the Howard University School of Social Work from 1992 to 2022, almost 30 years. At our beloved School of Social Work, she was a servant leader who exemplified the scripture that says, "Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant," meaning Dr. Gourdine would keep going over something until you got it right. She was honest and open, giving instructions that finally faculty would be glad to follow. I saw her as protective, merciful, and compassionate. She did have a practical side, however. I remember some years ago when I took her social worker as educator class, we were trying to keep up with her and her PowerPoint. She seemed to be going so fast. So we said, "Dr. Gourdine, can we get a copy of your PowerPoint?" She said, "No, I don't give out my PowerPoints. I went to a conference and a woman was giving a presentation and it was my PowerPoint." She had gotten it from the presentation I had given to her a year earlier, and you know I did go up to her and tell her about it. Dr. Gourdine was a truth teller. We knew she was a scholar, an administrator, a practitioner, an educator, a researcher. So much more I could say, but I have just a little time. She wanted those she served and those she educated to serve others, to know that we had to build up confidence in Black people and let people know they have the right to ask for more and more. Yes, I do see Dr. Gourdine as a faithful angel, one who in her own way tried to do what was right and orderly. As a matter of fact, she had all the grades and records of all the students she ever taught at Howard. It seemed that she served as an intermediary between God and humanity, bringing not only messages of hope and learning, but putting her words into action and effecting change and wholeness in so many individuals, families, schools, systems, and yes, graduate social work students and faculty. So let us not become weary in well-doing, for at the proper time we also will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Let us also hold on to Dr. Gourdine's legacy. Where is your faith? How do you show up in your purpose? Is it also possible that there is passion in your sense of being an advocate? Are you a seeker of justice? Are you a truth teller? Because you have no fear and you can't hold it in? Maybe there are some more faithful angels.
Thank you, Dr. Reverend Wiley. Very much appreciated. My name is Robert Cosby, and I will be presenting to you a few short comments and then a musical tribute of sorts. First, I'd like to welcome our provost who is here, Dr. Anthony Wuta. Would also like to welcome next to him, I believe, is Dr. Regina Dark. Drake, my apology, Dr. Drake. Also understand that our associate provost, Okino Dark, is here. And I don't know if we have any other special guests that I have missed, but would be glad to acknowledge them. So I was asked to share a musical selection of which I wanted to sort of think about it, and then I thought that you should know some of the words that are for this particular song. It sort of builds on what Reverend Dr. Wiley just spoke of. the light of love hides the darkness from above, shines on me, and it shines on you. It shows you what the power of love can do. Shine my light both bright and clear. Shine my light both far and near. Shine my light both far and near in every dark corner that I find. And now, what that goes to. If you ever needed the Lord before, we surely need him now. We surely need him now. We surely need him now. If we ever needed the Lord before, we need him right now. We need him every day and every night. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Come on and join me. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Come on, everybody. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yes, I am. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Thank you all.
Thank you. Dr. Gourdine and I had many things in common. Amongst those things were neither could sing. So we were good at finding other people to do this singing for us. So thank you so much, Dr. Cosby, Dr. Wiley, for those wonderful words of tribute. So much appreciated. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Joyce Ladner, former interim president of Howard University and former member of our faculty. Dr. Ladner and her sister Dory Ladner are really legends of the civil rights movement, and we are so honored to have them amongst us. Dr. Gourdine, she was a mentor for Dr. Gourdine and Dr. Snell as well. So if they are not doing what they're supposed to have done, it is really Dr. Ladner's fault. I had nothing to do with all of that. But Dr. Ladner often reminds me that she was not only a mentor, but she and Dr. Gourdine were friends. And I would certainly like to acknowledge that as I welcome her to the podium.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here and to have been asked to speak about Ruby, who was indeed my friend. You said earlier that you would have people introduce themselves as Ruby would have. Well, she would have said, Joyce is thus and so. And it took a number of years before we went from me being Dr. Ladner, her advisor. You know, it would have been fine with me if all my graduate students had called me by my first name, but it's not the tradition here to do so. But over time, she and I, we had a lot in common. We were both Southern girls, Southern women, strong mothers, tough-minded, and never thinking that there was a barrier that we couldn't cross. I mean, Ruby was the type person who, if the boulder was there, she would have found a way to move it out of the way, rather than going back or going in another direction. She was just a beautiful, beautiful person. I have a photo, I wish I'd remembered to bring it, of little Wesley. on the day he was christened, and I didn't get to the christening, so I went by their house down in Logan Circle afterwards, and that's when you wore a hat. I wore a hat to church and all that stuff. And Ruby and little Wesley was sitting on the sofa, and he had been able to pull himself up. You know how kids, as they grow along, I mean, I don't think he was walking yet, but he was mobile, and it was such a beautiful, beautiful photo. I took one, I think, where I had him in my lap. So that's how old our friendship goes back to. I became her advisor in the doctoral program when she came back to school in the early 80s. It was probably about 82 or so, I believe, because she already had a master's degree and she took the remaining requirements to get her Doctor of Social Work degree. So she was a mature student when she came back to school and had a tremendous amount of child welfare practice in the different jobs she had. When I met her, she was working for the adoption agency up on Connecticut Avenue. I can't remember. Piers Warwick, maybe. Yeah, I think that was it. Right. And we used to talk about adoption a lot because I had written a book on transracial adoption called Mixed Families, Adopting Across Racial Boundaries. And she, but getting back to when she came into the graduate program, I remember the day she came at my office. Well, she had called the head and asked if she could have an appointment. I said, of course. And she asked me if I would be her advisor, and I said, yeah. Because I always felt that she knew about as much as we did, with her extensive work before she came back to the graduate program. And I guided her through her coursework and her dissertation, and I got a grant from the Field Foundation, I believe, and she and I did this study on 2 generations of teen mothers. I had done my dissertation on teenage pregnancy, and we interviewed, she interviewed, I didn't. She went out in the field and interviewed mothers who were oftentimes in their 30s, early 30s, who had themselves maybe had a child at 14 or 15, and then their daughters were repeating the same pattern. And I really hate to say it, but she and I never did anything with that data except wrote one short piece. But it was very rich data. So I guided her through a dissertation, and I tried to mentor her with the same dedication as my graduate advisor had done with me 20 years earlier. I was happy that she selected this topic close to my heart on adolescent pregnancy. I looked for the pictures to date, but I couldn't find them. Ruby loved to give gifts, and she gave me some memorable gifts, one of which was to have her sister-in-law make a small quilt, and it was just dazzling with beauty, a variety of colors and so on. She was a very dedicated teacher and mentor to her students. After she joined the faculty, our relationship went from student to that of good friends, student professor to that of good friends. And the first time she called me Joyce, she said, "Is that okay?" I said, "Of course, I've been waiting for it." She is what I would have called a cornerstone, no matter whether it was her family, whether it was her job here. But she, in some filmmaking, they call it the tentpole character, the one who hold the building together and raise it up and so on. She was, not only did she lift up everyone and everything that she was associated with, but she made people better. She really wanted everyone to become better people or to reach their full potential. So she was a dedicated wife to Wesley and mother to her beloved Wesley Jr., and to her daughter, Pam, and then her sister and her niece. She and I were alike, as I said, because we were both raised in the South, in Mississippi, much deeper South than hers. And we kind of understood each other. She was a consummate social work professional. She believed in and advocated for the values that enriched the lives of everyone. She spent this early years really doing a lot of work in child welfare, which was what I was most interested in. So she was a model scholar with rigor and colleague who characterized her associations with mindfulness and compassion. She was my warm, thoughtful friend who checked in on me as I am advancing in age and experienced my own health challenges. It's hard to imagine how we will go on without Ruby, but that we must, and she would have wanted all of us to just keep on doing it, and probably would want us to remember what she told us as well. Okay, thank you.
My name is Okima Christian Dark. I'm Associate Provost for Faculty Development in the Office of the Provost. You have met the Provost. I'm here in that capacity. I could go on and talk about her as a friend and a colleague in so many ways, but I want to talk about her in connection with a very special program that we established in the summer of 2016 here at Howard University. And it's called the Junior Faculty Writing and Creative Works Summer Academy. Now, the Summer Academy is designed to support junior faculty in producing scholarship that will be the basis for promotion and tenure for most people. And actually, often I would tell people the Summer Academy is like a huge mentoring program, because the backbone of the Summer Academy are the scholar coaches. And the scholar coaches are Howard University faculty who are experienced, they are productive and established scholars, and they care a great deal about the future of the university. And that's why they participate as scholar coaches. Ruby Gourdine, Dr. Gourdine, was a member of the inaugural class. And you're not shocked by that, I see. Not only was she a member of the inaugural class, but she remained active with the Summer Academy for 5 years. She was extraordinary. She was a dedicated mentor, an amazing scholar. We've already heard. We're going to continue to hear. She was generous with her spirit. And as one scholar coach stated, she was just a fantastic person all around. So, on behalf of now over 100 junior faculty who have been through this particular program and who have successfully graduated from the program and gone on, some are tenured now, some are still on the road, but making it. We have this to say to our very dear sister, Ruby Gourdine. We admire and respect you as a brilliant and productive scholar in your field. We appreciated and prized the time that you spent with us as both a mentor and a scholar coach colleague. We adore and cherish you for your genuine compassion for others. And we applaud and praise you for your commitment to the promotion of the Black community in every respect. Hey, Black Power! You know that was Ruby! Personally, I will really miss, every time I think of her, I can see her smiling. And the only time I didn't see her smiling is when she would do this sort of furlough thing with her brow, and that's when she was thinking about something, right? And we're like, uh-oh, something's about to come out. That's going to challenge us. So I just want to, in sum, say that for the Summer Academy, we will miss all of what you've heard, her brilliance, her warmth, her genuine compassion for others. And I'd like to end with this quote from Helen Keller. What we once enjoyed and deeply loved, we can never lose. For all that we love deeply becomes a part of us. Dr. Gourdine, you are forever a part of the Summer Academy. Dr. Gourdine, Ruby, you are forever a part of us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I knew Dr. Gourdine for many, many years, but I am going to reflect today on her scholarship and her research while I was the dean at the School of Social Work for 10 years. I met Dr. Gourdine more than 30 years ago in the Doctor of Social Work program. She was ahead of me in the program. I met her when she was heavily pregnant with Wesley Jr., so that goes a long way too, Dr. Ladner. I had come to Howard because of Dr. Ladner's scholarship and reputation. Ruby and I connected initially as fellow faculty members around our common interests in African American adolescent developmental issues. Her interest at the time was on teen pregnancy, and I had hoped to do my dissertation research on adolescent fathers. We did our first joint presentation on adolescent parenting at a conference of the study of African American life and history. We continue to work together as colleagues on several joint projects. Our last presentation was at an NASW national conference with Professor Patricia Martin O'Mealy, sharing our respective family backgrounds and how those shaped and influenced our social justice values in teaching, practice, and research. We learned much about the many places Ruby lived in and the numerous people she came across and how these positioned and strengthened her value base. Whenever we were in a car with Ruby and we would drive anywhere in the city in Washington, D.C., Ruby would say, "Oh, I used to live there. I used to live there." Yeah, she was very proud of being a Washington, D.C. Person. Ruby served as chair of the direct practice concentration during the whole time when I was the dean. She kept me apprised of developments in the concentration and was meticulous in her leadership, remaining fiercely loyal, hardworking, and committed to Howard University until just a few weeks before her death. Ruby was unwavering in her approach and advocacy on behalf of African Americans, and would not let an opportunity pass to share information or question one's knowledge or understanding of all things Black in America. She was intent on students, MSW and PhD, and younger faculty especially, to understand the contributions of African Americans to scholarship and society. Ruby was a dedicated and focused mentor to many students who went on to pursue postdoctoral fellowships. Some of them are in the room today, and they've assumed leadership positions in social work. Her mentorship extended, as you heard from Associate Provost Dark today, to the Summer Academy. Ruby sacrificed her summers for 5 years to mentor and coach junior faculty across different disciplines to support their journeys towards tenure and promotion. I appointed Ruby as chair of our school's 75th anniversary celebration, a position she took on seriously and enthusiastically, developing her networks with Mr. Joe Madison, who was the talk host from Sirius XM Radio, who served as master of ceremony at the event, and she reached out to Mrs. Denise Barnes from the Washington Informer. I, in turn, continued to nurture the relationships with Dr. John E. Jacob, our alumnus, who announced a generous endowment in his name and the name of his wife, Mrs. Barbara S. Jacob, at the evening of our school's 75th birthday. Ruby balanced her faculty responsibility in terms of teaching, research, publications, and service with aplomb. Her book on social action, Advocacy and Agents of Change, Howard University School of Social Work in the 1970s, which she co-authored with Dr. Annie Brown, who took much hard work and time, and at some point, they needed financial support. So when Ruby approached me for that support, I gladly found funds so that she and Dr. Brown could use it to help them with the transcriptions of the interviews with former Howard University deans and faculty. Another example of Ruby's loyalty to Howard University was scholarship she engaged in with Dean Crew and Dr. Brown, when the three of them each led publications on Dr. Annabelle Burns-Lindsay, the founding dean of our school. Ruby consistently participated in our annual international service learning course community feedback sessions. She traveled with us in her mind and in her spirit, not physically, right? But at this event, students report back on their learning and cultural experiences in Cape Town, South Africa. Ruby was affirmed by the student narratives, especially when they mentioned that they would be better social workers in the USA based on their experiences in Cape Town, based on the school's philosophy of the Black perspective. I think that convinced her, made a constant support and loyalty, because Ruby had, and I differed on some issues around nationality, international, global issues, but we always came to a point where we appreciated our differences, and her loyalty I will never forget in terms of that program. Ruby also supported Helen and Maggie Shongbe and provided financial assistance for their child development work at Pinocchio Creche in Cape Town, South Africa. Whenever I went on a trip, Ruby would call me to our office and say, I have this envelope for Helen and Maggie. Will you please state that for them? This is hard. I returned to the faculty after 10 years as dean, and then was a member of the direct practice concentration, serving under Ruby's leadership. The roles were reversed, and I was a bit nervous, especially during annual faculty evaluations. Ruby was supportive and reassuring, and found places to credit me which I overlooked, ensuring that my faculty evaluation proposals for Dean Crew consistently ranked in the top tiers. And Ruby was a tough cookie. She did not accept or use personal excuses as reasons for not delivering products in a timely manner. She set this example as a model for herself. So what she expected from us, she lived. We will miss her, her presence, and her voice. But she left a legacy which will be long remembered by all of those she touched, and we are grateful for her life. May her soul rest in peace. I have two messages from former deans that I'd like to share with you and read with them. Dr. Douglas Glasgow was featured in the book that Dr. Brown and Dr. Gourdine authored. He said, I was saddened to hear of the passing of Dr. Ruby Morton Gourdine, a valued member of the Howard University School of Social Work faculty. I joined faculty members and her friends and family in mourning her loss. While I am unable to personally attend the ceremony to celebrate her life, I send my deepest condolences to all. I hope that her many contributions to social welfare and social work and to individuals in need will soften the grief of her family, her colleagues, and her friends. She will be remembered. Yours truly, Douglas G. Glasgow, Dean Emeritus, Howard University School of Social Work. On behalf of Dr. English, Richard A. English, who was the dean who hired Dean Crew, me, and Ruby, I bring condolences to the Gourdine family as well. Dr. English was the dean, as I mentioned, who hired Ruby, and she served for a long time under his leadership, and he's also saddened by her loss and remembers her contributions. Thank you, colleagues.
I am Janice Berry Edwards, and I'm going to share my reflections on Ruby as my mentor. Ruby recruited me to come back home. In fact, she actually called me and said it was time for you to come back home. I was at VCU at the time. And that's what I did. I came back home. But from that point on, I developed such a special relationship with her as my mentor. It was a combination of a relational relationship and a spiritual one. In fact, I published an article about mentoring, and it was truly influenced by that relationship that I had with her. Ruby, Dr. Wiley, you said it, and it is so true. She worked to you until you got it right. And I wasn't the easiest mentee, I have to be honest with you. I'm sorry, Wesley, but I gave her a hard time. But she stuck with me. She was there by my side, really, to the end. She was patient. She was committed. And she made sure that I understood the importance of what I had to give to not only students, but to the literature, to our social work community, made an impact. Yeah, she knew history, and she was very devoted to that. And the extent to which we transmitted her knowledge was very important to her and to the students. In fact, Ruby developed a comprehensive reading list so that our students could understand the path that we are on and the path from which we came. She, yes, was a true scholar. She taught me and insisted that I too became a scholar. And it was because of that I am where I am today as a full professor. But in addition to her being my mentor, she was my sister. I talked to Ruby, Leslie, you know, every morning. 6 o'clock in the morning, folks. She was calling to make sure I got it right for that week or that day. So, one of the things that I promised Ruby is that I will pass on what she unselfishly gave to me. She was the wind beneath my wings. And for so many of us in here, I know what you know that means. She was the wind beneath our wings. We will miss her, but we will carry forth with all the pearls that she gave us.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katie Atkinson, and I am a mentee of Dr. Ruby Gourdine, and it's an honor to stand here in front of you and have the opportunity to provide a reflection as a mentee. And before I do that, I'd like to first invite Dr. Amber Davis to come and give some reflections of her experiences as a mentee of Dr. Ruby Gourdine, and then we'll follow up with a video presentation from some of Dr. Gourdine's other mentees, and I'll provide some closing responses. So with that, please welcome Dr. Amber Davis.
Hello, everyone. Howard family. Yes, I'm Dr. Amber Davis. I was one of her students. She was my PhD advisor and my advisor before I became her actual PhD student working on my dissertation. So some of you all know her really well. Some of you all are getting somewhat of a teach-in about Dr. Ruby Gourdine in respect to her as a professional and her as a person. I will share with you the dimension of her as an academic mother. The reason why I share this reflection is that when she passed, I felt akin to a motherless child, And that was something totally new for me. I got to say, I am an empath, so it's like, whoa, what are you feeling now? What are you feeling now? But anyhow, I never had experienced that, and I do have a biological mom that is very present in my life, so I had to kind of make sense of that. So she was an academic mother in various ways. Similar to Dr. Barry Edwards, she often told me I had a hard head in the most honest yet non-abusing of ways. And I would really get on her nerves. She would say, you know you have a really hard head. She was similar to my biological mother in being adamant that racial experiences of our day are not quite the same as it was in the past. She would say, you know, you don't know what it's like to be Black in America. And I would look at her all kinds of crazy at her. One time in particular, I hope your family her family, you all don't mind me sharing, but one time in particular, she had to make it very clear by saying, as a child, were you spit in the face? The shock value mixed with the horror of such mistreatment definitely gave me like the hush mouth, made me realize like maybe I don't really know what it's like to be Black in America. She was tender to the touch and didn't let you drown in whatever academic situation you may be in. She let you find yourself in your research and scholarship and always supported whatever interest you had or opportunity you sought to pursue. And I got to say, like, I was the type, I wanted to like go for everything, like everything. Dr. Gourdine was always really proud of her students. I distinctly recall attending a few Howard School of Social Work graduations. And as Dr. Gourdine, this was before I graduated, so I graduated during the pandemic, so that's a whole nother story. But she would call up individuals for an award, and she would raise her voice with extra emphasis, call out the name of the person, and state, one of my students, and that would get me going every time, and I knew my time was coming, so that was really exciting. And yes, y'all, there was that time she embarrassed me in public. She apologized afterwards for what occurred. Dr. Gourdine didn't like for her mentees to go too long without checking in with her. With the, okay, I was waiting to hear from you. And she was great. She would pick up when I called, which is the essence of a good parent, picking up, although sacrificial when you are busy, and being available. Although I did not get to say goodbye, just like a mother, she would not just leave me abandoned or hanging. After she passed, she visited me in a dream 2 or 3 days later. And she passed the dean crew to take care of her students, which helped me to understand that I'm always on the mind of a true mother. I am grateful to be in the ranks of the many she mothered academically, and I thank Dr. Gourdine for her service and love. Thank you, everyone.
Reflections on the mentorship of Dr. Ruby Gourdine. Remarks provided by Dr. Ruby Gourdine's PhD mentees.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to share in this tribute on the legacy of Dr. Ruby Gourdine. Dr. Gourdine was a major inspiration in my academic career and beyond, as an advisor, mentor, friend, colleague, and co-author on numerous scholarly publications. I was grateful and honored to have her as my dissertation advisor and the great guidance she provided toward successful completion of the doctoral program. Dr. Gourdine reminded us that getting a doctoral degree was a major accomplishment, but it also came with major responsibilities to be a change agent and contribute to making a difference in the world. Her wise counsel, friendship, and mentorship has made a lasting, indelible impact. May she rest in peace, and continued prayers for Wesley and family.
Dr. Gourdine was my dissertation advisor, mentor, and greatest supporter throughout my time as a doctoral student at HUSSW. She was in my corner and believed in me from the beginning of the process. She consistently supported me in every endeavor, from attending my conference presentations and writing countless letters of recommendation on my behalf, to assisting me with obtaining the funding I needed to remain in the doctoral program at HUSSW. She also gave me my first opportunity to publish. Beyond the walls of academia, she also nurtured my spirit with encouraging words and exposure to the arts. She took me to see the opera for the first time. Also, her passion for history truly inspired me. She would frequently quiz me on my knowledge of history, asking me, "Do you know so-and-so?" I would sheepishly say, "No, I don't know that person." Then she would respond by saying, "You people need to know your history." Needless to say, she is the reason that I came to know the work of Black family scholars and their contributions to bringing a strengths-based perspective to the study of Black family life. She would not allow me to complete my dissertation without citing the works of scholars such as Harriet McAdoo, Andrew Billingsley, Robert Hill, and so many others. Today, I continue to hold these works so dear and endeavor to build upon them in meaningful ways in my own work. Even beyond my time at HUSSW, she continued to support me in the early years of my career as an assistant professor. I would frequently call and talk with her about my experiences as a Black woman in academia, and she would always be there with sage advice to share. One thing I also remember most about her is that she was a taskmaster. She always had a million different projects going on at once and seemed to get all of them done in record time and be on to the next one. She labored tirelessly in the vineyard for many years and served as such a great example of discipline, drive, and passion for all that she endeavored to do. Thank you, Dr. Gourdine, for all that you've done to make a difference in my life. May you rest in peace.
Hello everyone, this is Tariq Zidan, Assistant Professor at Indiana University School of Social Work in South Bend. I would like to contribute to the tribute to Dr. Gourdine. Dr. Gourdine has been a great mentor and a dissertation advisor to me during my time at Howard University. Dr. Gourdine has been more than helpful and supportive during my journey as a dissertation advisor, as a mentor as well. Dr. Gourdine has been someone you can call a friend, so somebody you seek when you need help. Dr. Gourdine has many qualities beyond his being a good mentor and a dissertation advisor. She was very caring person, enthusiastic, a good fit for my dissertation in disability because that's one of her area. And also she's very respectful of me, of others, as well as very well respected and expert in the field of social work. She will be missed greatly, and I miss her personally. Even the last time I was in DC in January for the SWER, Society for Social Work conference, I did look for her, but she was not there, and I did meet Dr. Crew, and I asked about Dr. Gourdine, where she is, because I would like to see her and meet with her and chat, as I used to do every time I go to DC after I graduated from Howard University. I will miss her greatly, and I appreciate everyone are here for the tribute for Dr. Gourdine. Thank you. Bye.
I spent a lot of time with Dr. Gourdine between working as her graduate assistant, research assistant, teaching assistant, and dissertation advisee. We worked on projects that led to presentations at regional and national conferences. We had at-length discussions about the politics and social issues of the day. Until I met Dr. Gourdine, I thought I had a solid grasp of Black history. However, she challenged me to seek out more information and learn about the individuals that I was previously unaware of. She, too, was a part of Black history. I was one of her last students to complete their dissertation and obtain my PhD. She was a significant part of making this happen as she advocated on my behalf and was supportive of me through illnesses and loss. Her mentorship has been an integral part of my academic journey. Although we were originally brought together for academic purposes, I've learned from her views and wealth of knowledge that has subsequently influenced my understanding of the world. I hope to pay it forward the way that she has done for me. Dr. Gourdine will be greatly missed.
Closing remarks from Dr. Katie Atkinson.
As you can see, Dr. Ruby Gourdine was an excellent mentor. She fostered personal relationships with each and every one of her mentees. I will always remember overstaying my welcome in her office more often than not, and I can confirm she even packed an extra lunch, knowing that both myself and Dr. Edwards would make an appearance. And if she offered food, of course, we would take it up on ourselves to have it. So she had to have that second lunch for herself. I'll also always remember that she always responded to my emails almost immediately, regardless of the time of day, even if it was just to confirm received, which meant so much for me working through that PhD program and the different trials that your experiences, just to know that you're heard and someone truly cares about you. I'll always miss her checking in upon me and my family, asking about their welfare, checking in, making sure my funding was coming through on time, checking to make sure I had housing, that I was overall okay. I'll always remember her talking about Black history with a joy and being in her office and seeing so many pictures that she had. She was a historian herself. There were so many pictures, and she would spread joy and talk about history, and of course harp on me of the people I did not know, and an argument of saying I wasn't born yet did not justify any of that. And I'll always remember that she was at the front row of pretty much every event that happened in the School of Social Work, whether her hand was involved in it or not. She was so excited about her mentees, and she would always spread the word, even though I was one of the shy ones and didn't really want that. She was always promoting what we were doing and inviting others to be there. And of course, she was the one in the front row as the biggest cheerleader to express that that's her mentee, that's her student. And although I get very emotional sometimes when I think about Dr. Gourdine, and even very sad, there's always a sense of peace that comes over me because I realized that Dr. Gourdine received her flowers while she was alive. She was an excellent mentor. She was an NASW social work pioneer. She was an esteemed scholar and advisor. And Dr. Gourdine is Black history, in which she loved so much. I can only hope that one day my mentees speak as highly of me as they do her mentees speak of her, and as she spoke of her mentor, Dr. Joyce Ladner. And rest in peace, Dr. Ruby Gourdine. I miss you. We all miss you. And I'd like to end this conversation the same way she ended it with me very often. You take care.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am Katrina Floyd, and currently I serve as the Director of Student Services here at the School of Social Work. It is a great honor to stand here before you in tribute to Dr. Ruby Morton Gourdine. I met Dr. Gourdine in 1995. I came in for an interview to work with her in the field office. And at that time, I was about 6 to 8 weeks postpartum. I was exhausted. And I sat in the office with her along with another colleague, and she and I talked about the roles in the field office, and she was so gracious and just so nice and so warm. So I finally started a couple of months after that. And she said to me one day when we were talking, she said, "Honey, you looked like you were about to pass out during that interview." And the thing about that is, she didn't make me feel that way. She made me feel like I was a mom and I'm coming in here and I'm getting on the grind. But she gave me grace, and she said during the interview, "Well, I know you say you're ready to start working, but how about you take another couple of months and then you can go ahead and start." And so that is how I met her. And we worked together for about almost 10 years in the field office. And one of the things that she would say when we were in the middle of a student field situation, "You can't make this stuff up, can you?" So as you all have heard from so many of my colleagues, Dr. Gourdine was a lifelong learner, researcher, and scholar. She maintained her purpose in this life and was steadfast in promoting social justice and identifying barriers that impacted the most vulnerable amongst us. She was clear and certain about the ways in which she navigated well the world of academia and understood the role of research in giving voice to problem solving and creating solutions. What's most difficult about her transition from this life is that her work has been interrupted. One of my last encounters with her was I was putting together a newsletter for the student service offices, and I don't know how I started talking with her about it, but as many of you have said, you say Black history, and she has something to add. And so I said, well, we're going to focus on Black History Month. And she said, oh, okay, I got something I want you to include, my encounter with Hank Aaron. And she talked about when she was a student in Atlanta, how they were all excited about Hank Aaron surpassing, I want to say, Babe Ruth's baseball running score. Yeah. Yep. And she said they were just elated once Hank Aaron got to his number. And she said later on during that day, she and some other students were driving and noticed this car in front of them. And the car door was open, and they couldn't figure out, what's going on with this person? Why is he driving and his car door is open? She said they managed to get up close enough and saw that it was Hank Aaron, and that he had earlier been followed by some white people who just did not want to see him accomplish and do well. And he was so frightened, he had his door open and was trying to get to safety. I am as grateful as so many of you for the remarkable impression that she made on my professional life. I extend my prayers and God's grace to her family, who she was so devoted to, and devoted in a way that was quiet and steadfast. You will be missed. You will be missed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jasmine Garnes. I am a second-year MSW student here at Howard. I currently serve as the president of the Student Council Association. Dr. Gourdine was my advisor during my entire Howard academic career up until this point. So I consider it an honor to be able to stand up here and speak a few words to you today regarding Dr. Gourdine's impact. And on behalf of the rest of SCA, we extend our deepest condolences to Dr. Gourdine's loved ones and colleagues and friends. I will be sharing a few student testimonies that really exemplify Dr. Gourdine's impact. The first from Ms. Hottie Pryor, second-year MSW student. She states, "She was my advisor. She helped me to allocate resources for my daughter who has special needs." The second response from Ms. Latoya Hogg. She states, "A few weeks after the murder of George Floyd, I struggled with how my voice could fit in the movement for the protection of Black individuals against police brutality. There was one person I knew I could call on to help me find that voice, and it was Dr. Gourdine. She and I had several options and arrived at a panel presentation that she willingly moderated. Dr. Gourdine will be missed dearly. She inspired me to challenge the norm and to arrive as my full, assertive, authentic Black self. And for that, I am so grateful to have known her and to have been her pupil." And the last from Ms. Jennifer Early in the audience, also a fellow SCA member, who states, "The day of the application deadline, I spoke with Dr. Gourdine. I'd received a voicemail from her telling me to reach out if I had any questions. I was nervous, but I called and she answered. What stood out to me was that she cared about who I was as a person and applicant. She wanted to know where I was from and my background. We talked about a shared connection that we had with a professor of hers from HU. After our conversation, I knew I had to submit. My only regret is I never got the chance to meet Dr. Gourdine in person to say thank you. Thank you, Professor Gourdine. You will be dearly missed." Thank you.
Zakaya Joyner will now join us to give remarks on behalf of the National Association of Black Social Workers, the Student Committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me? Wonderful. So as it was just introduced, my name is Zakaya Joyner, and I am a first-year Master of Social Work student here at Howard University, as well as the current chair of the Student Action Committee for the DC chapter of the Association of Black Social Workers. On behalf of ABSW's DC chapter, the Executive Board, and members, the Student Action Committee offers its sincere condolences to every individual impacted by the passing of Dr. Ruby Gourdine. Dr. Gourdine was regarded as a pioneer who utilized her formal and informal training and expertise to advance the field of social work. Her commitment to this work and the people and students of this profession is exemplified by all of you in this room and by each of the lives that she touched. She understood the significance of building relationships with staff and students alike. Over the span of her 30-year career here at Howard University's School of Social Work, Dr. Gourdine served as an advisor to many of its current staff and faculty. She truly understood the significance and importance of generational relationships and mentorship. Up until this past semester, she continued to offer her time, her wisdom, and expertise to current students pursuing their degrees in social work. In honor of Social Work Month and Women's History Month, the Student Action Committee is highlighting Black women who have made meaningful contributions to the field of social work. In recognition and in honor of Dr. Ruby Gourdine, we celebrate her life, her love, and long-lasting contributions to the Howard University School of Social Work, as well as the field of social work at large. May we continue to uphold her legacy and her commitment to advocacy through the work that we seek to do and the work that some of us are currently engaged in. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Whittaker, and I'm the Associate Dean for Academic and Student Advancement here in the School of Social Work. And I'm going to share some remarks, but I really wanted to say, listening to everybody, it became clear to me the role that Dr. Gourdine had in my life. Dr. Gourdine was my green light. And as I think about, she was my dissertation chair. And she was my dissertation chair after I went through a long and complicated road of trying to find that match. And I remember sending her a concept paper that I had been working on for a long time. Have I mentioned long enough? And I was so out of optimism and hope at that point. And I sent it to Dr. Gourdine, and just as Dr. Atkinson said, she replied within 24 hours and said, let's go for it. That was the green light that allowed me to complete my doctoral education and positioned me for the current job I hold now. Even in this position, Dr. Gourdine was the green light. When I had questions, she would say, you can do it. You're up to the task. You can manage. So to her family, thank you for sharing your green light with me. Our Alumni Association President, Ms. Jaslyn Northcross, could not be with us today, but she asked me to share her remarks. She says, on behalf of HUSSW, it is a privilege to stand before you to honor the memory of Dr. Ruby Gourdine. Dr. Gourdine had a way of making a lasting impression upon the people she encountered, even if the encounter was brief. She had a subtle, laid-back energy to her that was comforting. I remember nervously waiting to walk into the awards and recognition ceremony one year, and I felt relieved when I learned that I would be standing behind her. She was gentle and encouraged me that day. My former supervisor, who was an alumna of the class of 1997 School of Social Work, spoke highly of Dr. Gourdine. She would reflect on how Dr. Gourdine made her feel like she was seen during a time when she was balancing a job, a full course load, and other responsibilities. Dr. Gourdine knew her students even when they didn't think she did. She knew their strengths and recognized their full potential. In hindsight, the little things she said and words of encouragement now resound in full chorus. We are immensely blessed to have been in the presence of Dr. Ruby Gourdine. Her legacy will continue to live in this institution and the hearts of countless alumni, students, faculty, and friends for years to come. It's bittersweet to say, see you later, to someone who has made such an significant impact to our school, our profession, and our family. Let us find comfort in her teachings, writings, and memories. Let us pick up her torch and continue to press forward with her in our hearts. Ms. Jaslyn Northcross. This afternoon, we wanted to make a special presentation to our colleague. Years ago, when we were looking for a purpose outside the room or the room adjacent to the auditorium, Dr. Gourdine was a champion for the designation of this space as our pioneer room. In this space, we would honor exemplars of the School of Social Work. We would honor those whose groundbreaking leadership made significant contributions to our school and to Howard University. One area that was particularly important to Dr. Gourdine was the display case, where we could highlight significant publications from our faculty. Therefore, it is with pride and profound gratitude that the Howard University School of Social Work dedicates that display case to the memory of our dear colleague, Dr. Ruby Gourdine. After today's program, you will see that the case houses some of her many publications. We hope that this display will serve as a reminder of her commitment to celebrating our collective history as a program and a people, as well as the legacy of her scholarship. I invite Mr. Wesley Gourdine and Dean Crew to please join me on stage.
On behalf of the Howard University School of Social Work, Wesley, we present to you this plaque in memory and honor of our colleague and our friend, Dr. Ruby Gourdine.
I want to thank the university and the family of Howard University, and I want to especially thank the social work community. Really, you took my wife away from me. She was dedicated to the social work community and Metropolitan AME Church. Those are the two people that I had to constantly battle. My wife gave a lot to them. Really, she did. I have to say that. And I want to leave this to you from my wife. And it's the spirit of my wife. Your spirit lives on and always will. The time you laugh, gave advice, or echo memories of those whose lives you've touched. It comforts to know that death cannot diminish the important ways you touched our lives, that grief cannot take away the good times we shared, that sorrow will fade in time, but memories will remain forever. I thank the Howard community for what they have done for my wife. I really appreciate it, and I will always remember you. I hope you'll remember me as I remember you.
Thank you, Mr. Wesley Gourdine, another educator, and it's so really important for us to take time to acknowledge that. I included in the program an opportunity for those that I didn't give a name to come up and share a few remarks. So if there's someone out there who just has some pressing words that you feel like you want to, it is certainly okay at this time to come up and do so. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Annie Brown, and some of you know Dr. Gourdine and I worked very closely together. Some of the students would see her and call her Dr. Brown, and see me and call me Dr. Gourdine. That's how close we were. But I must say, Ruby took to academia like a duck to water. But I often said to her, I don't know that I would have stayed in academia had I not met her, and we developed this working relationship. We wrote a book together. Now, you know, writing together is not easy, but I must say, you know, and especially when you have two strong-willed and kind of opinionated people, but we ended up probably being even closer, because the most I've heard, you know, Dr. Gourdine was a taskmaster, a go-getter. I'm slower. The most I would get from her was, okay, Annie, let it go, as we traded information back and forth to check and recheck. She would say, let it go. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so for that, we were able to have a wonderful working relationship. And when I retired, the week after my retirement, 7 o'clock Monday morning, I got a call from Dr. Gourdine. She was not going to let me go that easily. And so from time to time, in politics and all, we would talk. I guess she had just talked to Janice at 6. We would talk at 7, and we would solve the problems of the world. And this week, with the confirmation hearings for Judge Jackson, there was a time when I actually had the phone in my hand. thinking, I've got to talk with Dr. because we would discuss these kinds of issues forever until it was time for her to go. I was retired, so I didn't have a lot to do. And I'm just going to close. Oh, the other thing is we often ended up in places where we weren't supposed to be. And I really think there's some reason I'm standing here now, and I was not there because I came in and I was taking my seat in the audience, and Dr. Berry said, you're speaking. I said, no, I'm not. And she said, yes, you are. And she brought me to the front. So I think that was probably Ruby's doing, because she always said, I got us into situations where we would either end up kind of taking over the discussion or speaking when we weren't necessarily supposed to say anything. And so here I am. And I must say I am wearing this because this was a part of Ruby's Christmas present this year. And I thought that I would wear this in her honor. But I would like to close. I said this at her funeral, just a very short poem that came to me the day that Dr. Gourdine died. I said, my dear friend and colleague died today. How I prayed that she could stay. She put up a valiant fight before turning her face to the eternal light. She left us all bereft and sad, but not one of us not glad that we shared a part of life's journey with her. She was a woman of substance and determination, generosity and inspiration, and she touched many lives. When we lose someone we loved, cared for, we must think of not learning to live without them, but learning to live with the legacy they left for us and the responsibility we have to carry it forth. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lois Calhoun, and Ruby Gourdine was my dear friend for 44 years. When I moved to this area, I ended up volunteering at the Black Social Workers Conference, and that's where I met Ruby Gourdine. I am a social worker too. And like I said, for the past 44 years, she's been my sister. I'm closer to her than I have been to my own two sisters that live in Philadelphia. We shared so many things together. Her son and my son are about 6 months apart. We did so many activities together. I shared Howard. I was an adjunct professor here at Howard for a couple of years. She was just everything that everybody has said about her. She was the most wonderful person, most caring person. She was dedicated to her family. She was dedicated to her church. She was dedicated to her community. She loved Howard with her soul. I mean, everything was about Howard. In fact, the day she went to the hospital, 2 days before she went to the hospital, I was at her house trying to help her get her grades and things in for Howard. That's how dedicated she was. And then I came back the next day and, Wesley said, she's sick. She really needs to go to the hospital. And, I kind of helped talk her into going to the hospital. That was the most painful thing, to stand out there and watch her son look at her in the ambulance as it drove away. I'll never forget that view. But she was a dedicated mother. She was a dedicated social worker. She loved her students and her mentees. She was proud of everything that all of you were doing. She constantly kept me up to date where you were, what you were doing. Shayna, because you were my student in mental health class, I kind of followed you, and I knew how important it was to get you out in your last year. Amber, I always called you her daughter. She would say, oh, I was talking to Amber, or I was talking to my daughter, so I always knew who that was. she was proud of the students and the work you were doing at all of the universities across the country. That's her legacy, that, you know, everybody that she touched that was able to go out there and show that, hey, you know, folks coming from Howard University, we're the best and we can do the best. And she encouraged that. She loved that. And it was part of her legacy to see you all go out there and do well. She loved every committee that she was on. I mean, when she did her dissertation, she shared her book with me before she presented. She said, come and look at this and see what I did. When she went up for tenure, she shared her book with me. So I was a part of Howard's family even before I became a part of Howard's family. She was just the best friend that anyone can ever have. I don't know how I'm going to do without her, because we could talk about family, we could talk about our kids. You know, Wesley, I have a son that's disabled. Anybody who's ever been in her office, there's a poster, we need your help. That's my little black son that has muscular dystrophy that's on that poster that she has had in her office for years. So, I mean, she's just been, she'll be missed. But I think she's touched everybody in a way that you'll always remember her. Like I said, her legacy with all of her mentees will live on. She's given you the courage to move forward and to continue to support Black people, Black legacy, Black history, and Black families. So I miss her. I love her. We'll be there for Wesley and the rest of the family. And Howard's family, please keep her in your prayers. Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Good afternoon, family. So I'm a third-year PhD student here at the Howard University School of Social Work. Last year, Dr. Gourdine and I started on a project for the Women's Center. And one of the assignments for us was to research the historical contributions of women here at the School of Social Work from inception to present time. And it is very true that she is going to tell you to do it until you do it right. She called me every other day with something that I needed to change, something that I needed to take out, something that I needed to put here instead of there. And she would always tell me, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I'm doing this so that you'll understand the importance of getting it right. And I used to tell her, Dr. Gourdine, I completely understand, because I understand that you are doing this so that I can be a better researcher, a better scholar, a better academic. And I appreciate that. And I'm truly going to miss her. She was just always enriched with knowledge. And when I completed my last semester of coursework, I took her social work education class. And she had absolutely no problems with asking, so Chelsea, do you know who such and such is? And I shamefully would say, no, ma'am, I don't. And she would go, why not? And I'd make up all these excuses. Well, you know, Dr. Gourdine, you know, I'm working and, you know, the pandemic and, you know, I'm just tired all the time and I'm having to read for your class and others and I'm trying to figure out my research topic. And she was like, well, I mean, you still have to make time for this because this is just as important as the other things that are on your plate. And she's right. She's right. Because she, too, is also a part of Black history. And that is very, very important for us to keep that going. And just so happened the last research project that I did was about women's history and the contributions that they did for this school. And a big part of the data that I used for the project was the book that her and Dr. Annie Brown did, Social Action, Advocacy, and Change. And it had an immense amount of information for my project. And I made sure to put her as my acknowledgement for my manuscript for the Women's Center. And she said, Chelsea, you know you don't have to put that in there. That, you know, you don't have to put that in there. I just wanted to make sure that everything was correct, everything was right before we submitted it. And I said, absolutely not, Dr. Gourdine. Because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been able to do this project at all. So it would be highly unfair for me to keep you out of that. So I made sure to put it in. And just last week, we were able to use my poster for the Women's Center at the Lewis Stokes Library. And it's because of her that I was able to do that. So I just want to say thank you to her family. Thank you for everybody for being here, because it means a lot that we were able to show up for Dr. Gourdine, because she showed up for us many a times when she had other things that she could be doing. So she will be missed. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Let me take this off. For those of you who don't recognize me, I'm Professor Emeritus James E. Cragen, and I want to say a few words about our good friend Ruby. To the dean, the Gourdine family, the provost and his staff, the former staff and current staff of Howard School of Social Work. In the past year, we've celebrated 3 major contributors to the legacy of Howard School of Social Work: Marcella Daniels, Dr. Gladys Walton Hall, and today, Dr. Ruby Gourdine. All of them have contributed to the legacy of this school, and I joined the faculty in 1972, and 20 years before Dr. Gourdine came, and 4 years after I spent 4 years at the University of Chicago. So I joined as a very young man in the middle of the vortex of the civil rights movement. And Dr. Gourdine, I understand, participated in the student movement here when she came to Howard after being a master's student at the school I graduated from, Clark Atlanta University. So our paths have crossed in terms of commitment and investment in Black institutions over the years. And over that time, Ruby and I, and in effect, she wrote about the efforts we made to blend the student revolution, the revolution in the country for Black folk, and incorporated in her book, Social Action, Advocacy, and Agents of Change. Ruby also took Annie under her wing after she had been my graduate assistant. And the tools that she brought to bear to address the inequities of Black life in this country, you have talked about earlier today. I'd just like to comment on Ruby as a colleague. Ruby and I worked together on many committees in the school. And there were times when we agreed, and there were times that we did not agree. However, it was always clear that she was committed to the goals and objectives of this school, that she was committed to Black institutions, that she was committed to doing the right thing, and that she would do this incessantly. This was her DNA. I basically have felt that her loyalty was both her strength and her challenge. But Ruby was authentic. She believed what she lived, and she obviously infused that throughout the social work community here. And her intellectual curiosity, born from the encounter she had, led to her in her final days pursuing the Black perspective as an intellectual curiosity that is still not resolved. So as a consequence, her last contribution, at least publicly, in doing the 100th anniversary of Clark Atlanta University special volume, which she edited along with one of my classmates, was done with the idea of trying to make sure that Black institutions were celebrated, and that she felt that that process was not complete, and she felt that that process should continue to be pursued. So with that in mind, I'd like to just say thank you, Ruby, for all you've done and all you continue to do. She worked up until the end. She would not stop because she felt her job was not complete. And we thank you for all you've done.
Good afternoon. I am Dr. Cynthia Harris. I taught here until April 2020, actually. And I was also the director of student services and professional development. But that's not when I met Ruby. I met Ruby when she was with the DC public schools. I was with the neighborhood health centers. And we were on a panel together. Have no clue what the panel was about at this point, but that was some years ago. And so we were on a panel together, and I did my presentation. She did her presentation. We disagreed with one another. So after the presentation, we spent a lot of time having a long discourse about why I thought this was the way it was and why she thought that was the way it was. And so I got a chance to work with her on a lot of things. She was there. She was there when my mom died. She was there. She was there when I was the vice president of the DC Metro chapter of NESW, and she worked on the committee with me. She was there when I became president. She was there when I came here, she was there when I did my dissertation defense. So Ruby was there, and she's been there for a lot of us. But Ruby was also, we lived down the street from one another, and Wesley would pick us up or take us to the, to drive us and to the Charter Day dinners. He was playing oldies but goodies. So happened her roommate from undergraduate here worked with me at the University of District of Columbia, so I would hear all these stories about Sarah and Ruby. And then Jim mentioned that she was at the protests when she was here at undergraduate, and that was part of the story she would tell me about how, yeah, my aunt said I shouldn't be out there protesting with those students, but they took a picture, but they had only the picture of her legs, and so her aunt never knew. I would laugh. She had me laughing all the time. And Dr. Snell mentioned the fact that she lived many places, not only here in DC, but in Virginia and in Massachusetts. And so one day I decided, Ruby, I need to know how many places you lived. And so I started counting. And at last count,
I was up to 25. And I said, how did you stay up on 16th Street all that time? You know, you would like to wander around. So that was Ruby. Jim also mentioned Gladys Hall, and at her service, I read this poem, and I'd like to read this also. Ruby, may you always walk in sunshine and God's love around you flow. For the happiness you gave us, no one will ever know. It broke our hearts to lose you, but you did not go alone. A part of us went with you the day God called you home. 1,000,000 times we needed you, 1,000,000 times we cried. If love could only have saved you, you would have never died. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Good afternoon. I'm Ferial Rose Sharif, better without a mask. And I knew Ruby in several capacities. She came here as a student. That's when I knew her. And I knew her as a professor. And then I got to know her when we both were administrators with Richard English and Dr. Snell, and now Dr. Crow. And what was amazing about Ruby to me was that she was totally committed to her cause, and there was no way that you could make her things differently. And there were times, and I respected her for that. We agreed about 95% of the time, and when we disagreed, but we talked about it. And she was so committed that I respected her commitment even when she was totally, she didn't understand my perspective. But I knew that she understood it. And a couple of occasions, especially at the administrative cabinet, when she was totally committed to the Black perspective, which I was committed to totally. But she would come and say, Faye, you don't understand the experience of an African American in this country. And I said, Ruby, I'm more African American than you are. I was born in Africa. I was brought up in Africa. I speak Swahili now. And so I'm American. I'm committed to the Americans. She says, no. And then our differences emerged as I talked about my commitment to the Muslims in America and what the Muslims were going through as immigrants, refugees in this society. She says, but still it is not the same. And that was Ruby all right. What I want to say has been said by most of the presenters before, so I won't go onto it. But I knew her as a daughter, because she was devoted to her mother as I was devoted to my mother. And we both had sons, so we would talk about our mother and our sons. That was so important to her life, as it is important to my life. And both of us had our mothers live with us till they passed. And it was very touching, Ruby was very committed to her family. So I would say to her husband, she was so committed, it was her family, Howard, and her church. And, we would talk, it is my family, Howard, and my mosque. So it was, there were things that we were so closely committed to and appreciated about each other. And then the last is Doctor, you talked about her as a dissertation advisor. There were times when I had challenges with some students, not you, when I would go to Ruby. Now what do we do? Would you take this student on? And she did take some very challenging students. And as you all have said, not you, Doctor. But she made sure that they completed, and they completed well. And that represented what she was about. She'll work hard, she'll do her best, and she'll make sure that everybody around her would do her best. And last of all, she was a bison. You know, that's another of her story that started from the beginning to the end. It was always she's a bison. And so this is a loss to the Howard community and to the social work profession, social work school, and to all of us, Dr. Crew. Thank you.
Provost Wuta has stayed with us for the duration of this program. And I think that's important to note. So as you have heard, Provost, the legacy of Dr. Ruby Gourdine, when you hear all of the other things about Howard, remember, that's Howard too. And Dr. Gourdine was Howard. Many of you spoke about Dr. Gourdine in the present tense. And that's because she's still present, Wesley. Both Wesleys. She's still present with us. Many have asked how you might contribute to her legacy. In response to that, we've identified an existing endowed scholarship lectureship account in which you can contribute to. And many of you have already done that. To date, Wesley and family, we have received over $1,000 in contributions toward that goal. And that does not include the donation that you made today on behalf of the Gourdine family. So thank you so much. There are cards for those who wish to do that, to make a donation, and we will use it for a lectureship dedicated to the Black perspective. As you leave today, please take a moment and visit the legacy display case that Ruby fought so hard to get. I mean, really, I went in the office one day, she had Dr. Snell on the floor beating him down about getting that case there. So he could identify with that. That's how serious she was about it. We've also given each of you a pen today. And it is a pen that's a Black pen that focuses on the Black perspective. And it is trimmed in gold because Dr. Gourdine was our gold. I would like to thank each of you for attending and ask that you continue to honor the legacy, the extraordinary legacy of Dr. Gourdine, her legacy regarding social justice, the Black perspective, and Howard University. She was an undergraduate here from Howard University as well. And I really fought with her every year, Provost Wuta, because she kept giving COAS money. And I said, you know, that should come to social work, but she said no. COAS supported me. So she had an undergraduate degree in sociology and always supported alma mater in that particular way. So it was her greatest wish that Howard would continue to honor its historical mission and pass the legacy forward. During her final days, Wesley called me and said, you need to call Ruby. I said, but she's in the hospital. I need to let her heal and get well. He said, you don't understand. Nobody in the hospital is going to get any rest until you call her. And so I had to call the hospital, and we talked 2 hours. And while they were holding the phone, and I kept saying, Ruby, let's continue this another day. She said, no, I'm leaving you the responsibility of carrying forth the Black perspective. But more importantly, I'm leaving you my students that I have mentored, that you will make sure that they finish the course. So I called all of them that I could remember, and I said, hey, she's looking out for you. So all of us who've experienced her leadership, let us double down on our efforts to be kind to one another, and focus our energies on fighting racism, not each other. So that is what Dr. Gourdine would want me to say to you. She would expect nothing less. Thank you so much for being here today. This officially ends our program of celebration. Please join us and look at the legacy that we have for her. Thank you so very much. As Dean Whittaker said, you have the green light to go.